Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if it's morning where you are, but probably feels like it because you're new to this bullshit. Rectifier diodes and no voltage regulator, single wire charging system. Seems pretty simple until, well, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. We got 1985 Craftsman 2 here with a Briggs & Stratton twin cylinder opposed. Electric clutch, they drain power while you cut the grass, so you need to make power or the battery is going to be dead if you have a smaller battery. I swapped her out for this bigger car battery, that way I could actually cut before my charging system was fixed. It took me a long time to figure this out on the charging system. I guess 45 minutes at a time once a month, and the best sometimes you're better just to put your head down into her, get the ohm meter, get the pendulum, and get her done. I'm going to show you how to rip through this wiring harness and figure out where the problem is. And it might be different for you, but that's okay because I'm going to show you how to separate it all up. It does help to have a copy of the wiring harness because it really definitely makes it more simple for you because it can assure you on how many wires you don't need to clean. This is your charging circuit here coming from the ground. Here, engine coil, making power off your engine coil. This first dot here, each one of these dots represents a joint in the wire, but this first dot is this connection here, coming out of the left side of the engine. First thing you want to do is split this connection, take your ohm meter and set it to volts AC and see how many volts you have with the motor about half throttle, 3,500 RPM. Is that you're supposed to have a minimum of 22 volts AC at 3,500. When you're above 3,500, you should have 24, 26, 30, 32 volts AC. If you have 32 volts AC, the odds are that you're getting power. And the stator's not your problem. Now you can ohm test it. I didn't seem to have much luck with that because mine said that I had continuity. You come over to here, you have your rectifier diode harness. This one I homemade. I ordered 6A6 diodes, rectifier diodes on Amazon, and I pulled the pins apart on this harness and put the diodes in. And this ended up being my problem. It's not that the diodes were cheap, they're actually working well. And I'm going to show you how to test a diode too later on in the video. But it was a bad connection between these push pins and the diode itself. And I figured that out with the ohm meter. And it was showing me that I had a lot of resistance between this side of the plug and that side of the plug. And not necessarily like in here, but I'll pull this apart and show you later. I'm gonna break this down very simply for you guys. So look, I have my my multimeter set to ohms. Continuity. Well, it's not ohms. It is continuity, but mine happens to tell you the ohms when you test for continuity. So if I touch these two tips together, there you go. I have basically zero resistance between the two tips. Oh, yeah, zero. No resistance. So now what I'm going to do is break the harness down. After I verified with the engine running that I have volts AC coming from my stator, I'm going to disconnect. This is your wire. This runs up to the rectifier harness. Pull it out from the rectifier harness. And I test for continuity on each side of the wire. Doesn't matter which side. Put one of your multimeter leads into the rectifier side and put the other lead on the stator side. It's the wrong plug. That's what the pendulum will do to you. And look at that. Basically, we have continuity and we have next to zero resistance. So, oh, there we go. So I can assure you this wire is not your problem. So moving on, you can now move into this harness. I don't really feel like unwrapping my harness to show you guys, but you can, if you take the insulation off of yours, you can put one side of your probe just on the wires before the diode, and then the other side of the probe right here, and make sure that you have no resistance through that quick connect. Because that was my issue, is I had resistance through just this one side of the quick connect, and it wasn't allowing the power into the rectifier diodes all the time. I had intermittent power, and even when I had enough power, it wasn't even enough to give me a positive reading on my amp meter. And that was because of a really bad connection in this quick connect. moving on to rectifier. Inside this little harness is 2 little rectifier diodes, 6A6s to be exact, 2 of these. And they have an anode end and a cathode end. And what that means is it allows power to flow in one direction, but not back the other way. And it also converts AC power to DC power. So that's how it can convert it from 26 volts AC down to 14 volts DC, enough to charge your battery. You can test these briefly by going to continuity test. Take your positive and negative. Now the power on your multimeter, on mine it seems to flow from positive and negative, and I'm sure it's very common. You can set one lead on the, put the positive on the anode and put the negative on the cathode. Oh, look at that, now I gotta switch. And I'm getting a reading. And what that means is that it's allowing power to flow from positive to negative. And that's how it's supposed to work, from anode to cathode. Now, if I switch these without switching the direction of that, when I make a connection here, I should get open loop. Yeah, nothing at all. And that's normal. And that means that this rectifier diode is working properly, and that you should do that to both of the ones that are in your harness. And you don't have to take them out. You just got to switch around the prongs on your multimeter and figure it out. Make sure both of them are in good working condition and they're not allowing power to flow backwards from cathode to anode. It only needs to flow from anode to cathode. Anode is the end without the band, and cathode is the end with the band. So where we left off was, you know that your diodes are in working order. One of them flows backwards, as you can see on the wiring diagram. The one for the headlights flows backwards, get charging system. And we know that one's working. So from that point on, now you should do the same thing I told you to do before. In continuity test, like ohm read test, between this wire on the end of the diode and the quick connect again. Like test between, like you can see where my diodes end, test the wire on this side to the other side of that clip. Make sure there's no resistance, because you want no resistance. You want all the power that you can to be able to have its full potential through the wires. So now you've made sure that you're getting all the potential that you possibly could in ohms through here, and through your diode. At least not through the diodes, because they will have resistance, but everywhere but the diodes has no resistance until here. So now you're going to unplug this end of the harness, as you're now going, which this is the fat plug, and that is the skinny plug on the ohm meter that I just pulled. And we're going to do an ohm test from here to there to ensure that there's not a bad connection on here, or anywhere that possibly in between inside the ignition switch could be causing the problem. So just do a simple ohm test, make sure you have no resistance. Okay, here we go. So I've got one end of my probe in that red wire socket. I've got the other end of my probe on the wire that would go to the amp meter. And that now means I'm testing through the ignition switch. And as you can see, I'm getting nothing. And that's because the ignition switch isn't in the on position. Has to be in the on position. As you can see on the wiring diagram, ignition switch on, B to L, which connects B through L, therefore connecting the charging system back to the battery. And if you look at the resistance, we're getting no resistance, which means the ignition system or any connections between where we're testing, not our problem. So the very next step is to do precisely what you just did, but just with the amp meter. Take one probe and put it on one tab of the amp meter. Take the other probe, take it to the other tab, and then check your resistance. Low resistance, not the problem. So you've now ensured that you have no resistance from this plug all the way through to here. Now you've actually even checked the amp meter, so now you're good to here. Now your job is to continuity test this plug to the fuse. So you can take your fuse out of your charging. You can take one probe. Now I already know which one's which. One of these will read constant power from the battery, so beware of that. because it's hooked to your battery. But I know this side is the one that goes to that amp meter. So, okay, so look, I got it continuity testing from one side of my amp meter back to the charging fuse. 0 resistance. That's not the problem. Well, I guess now from this point, the only thing left to continuity test in your circuit is the other side of the fuse holder back to the side of your solenoid. Very little resistance. So it's not the problem. So now we know that we actually do. We have the potential for amperage flow all the way around the circuit. So nothing on the circuit is therefore my problem. In my instance, I'm sure you would have been stumped somewhere. You have found something that is giving you resistance, and if you're not getting resistance anywhere on your whole entire circuit, then you need to look closer and to make sure that these diodes are functioning properly. And if you know that you are getting power AC to here, then the next step would be, okay, you're getting power AC in this wire, plug this in with the insulation stripped. Don't let it touch anything that could ground out to. Take one of your probes, make sure you're getting power AC to the actual physical diode end. And then switch your voltmeter from AC to DC and touch the other end and make sure you're getting DC out before it even goes into that plug. That would be my advice to you.